Good morning, everyone. Welcome to BAMF. Today, we're going to be sitting down with Adam Meyers of Drop Dead Studios to talk about Spheres of Power and Spheres of Might and his active Kickstarter. I'm your hostess for the morning, Alice Peng, aka Lala Twiddle, and with me is Jacob. Hey, Jacob.
Hello, thank you for having me.
You're welcome, and we always love having you, as you know. And Jacob's done art for Adam Meyers, so this is going to be awesome.
I have.
Quite a lot of it.
And as always, that's following me around is Brandon Powers down there.
I am a lost little puppy dog. So
yes, he is, or a really, really big ogre foot. So, Adam, please tell us all about Spheres of Power and Spheres of Might for those people that don't know about it yet.
Okay. So Spheres of Power was a alternate magic system that we made starting for the Pathfinder role-playing game, but as we'll talk later, is now coming to 5th edition D&D, where the whole shtick of it was trying to take magic as it's been done for the whole Vancian tradition, which if you've especially played D&D for years and you were there for 1st edition, 2nd edition, 3rd edition, it's been the same the whole time. Taking the whole thing, throwing it out, and rebuilding what magic can do from the ground up. Our shtick is that it's concept-based rather than spell list-based. So if you walk in and your kid brother wants to play Naruto, your kid sister wants to play Elsa, and your dad wants to be a Jedi, you can build all of that right there at the table rather than having to hand them, say, a sorcerer and go, well, if you just stick to these spells, it'll kind of feel that way. You can instead build it by concept. And since then, we then did Spheres of Might, which is a martial variant of the same thing that kind of expanded what combat could do and expanded tactics, so you could kind of do the same thing and build a real concept into your character. And we kind of been going straight from there. It's everything I've tried to do that wasn't Spheres related never really caught on. But Spheres has been doing well. It has a very big group of dedicated fans who really love it. And so, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what it's been for us since then. It's just been expanding that options and what it does and where you can find it.
Well, you can certainly count the people at this table among the fans. I've loved D&D forever. I've played everything but the red box. But that said, I'm not a huge fan of Vancian magics. Whenever I want to run something, I'm like, I want something alternate than an alternative to Vancian magic, because it just doesn't feel like a great way to exhibit sympathy and contagion in a lot of concepts. So I really like the Spheres of Power book, and that was something that really got us into it to begin with. So you were mentioning that you were going to transition us to 5th edition. So let me show everyone what you're talking about. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what people should be expecting right now?
Well, so we are doing a Kickstarter. There it is.
Which you're almost double your goal already, which is
already
beautiful.
With 22 days to go.
I'll take it. So, I mean, Spheres is a add-on to It was an add-on to Pathfinder. It was an adjustment to the rules, so you could play it with Pathfinder, but it changed the way things felt a lot. So we're just bringing the system over now to 5th edition. If you're familiar with Spheres at all, it is much of the same thing. Some new classes and subclasses and class options, and the spheres, which allow you to build what your character can do through that concept-based approach. Just really adjusted for 5th edition. Because 5th edition has such a different design paradigm from Pathfinder, we are expected to still adhere to that paradigm, but still have a lot of the fun of it. A lot of the, the concept-based building, the options and abilities that outstrap kind of what the base hold on things is. I'm not really sure what else to say other than it's Spheres.
That sounds great.
I mean, I know if people here are not familiar with Spheres, that term probably means nothing to them, and we can break down a little bit more about how they work. But that's really the shtick, is it opens up the ability to build a caster by concept, as well as the ability to build a world by concept. If you want, we can get a lot more into what that means. But the whole shtick of the system is to take the system that you love and kind of unshackle it. So if you wanted to make a world that doesn't default to divine arcane magic divides and wizard sorcerers and clerics and warlocks. If you wanted anything else, a land full of candy magic users who use Avatar-style martial arts to enact Naruto-style jutsus, you can do that without having to adjust your concept to fit the rules as they are previously incarnated, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And one thing for Pathfinder, I haven't played the 5th edition version, but it works side by side in a really good way. If you have some people who are interested in learning a new magic system or playing a different type of fighter, but you have others that are just like, well, I don't really want to do a whole lot of reading. I've had this problem on other times where I've tried to bring in systems and they don't really line up that well. This one, we had traditional clerics and then we had soulcaster or something like that. That they both felt like they were bringing something to the party that was whatever they wanted for that character, and it worked so well, so seamlessly. The Spheres of Might, I've seen only a little bit of that duality, but that one also worked really well. And when I brought this into my Pathfinder game, it enthused people on a new character, and unfortunately it was in the middle of a campaign where I started bringing this in, and some people were like, wow, when my character dies I'm going to, and I was like, well
yeah,
cool.
well, and people did die, and that became what they wanted to do. So exactly.
I'm sorry if I encouraged player death.
I do a good enough job encouraging it. I kind of am punishing in my D&D Pathfinder stuff. I feel that if there's not a threat of death, that the game's not as fun. So I demand that they make tactical decisions and sometimes retreat, and they don't always do that.
Actions should have consequences in any game.
And you do have great art, as we were showing as we're scrolling through. You have great art, which is very engaging for the mind for people who want to do stuff. And I'd just like to point out that Spheres of Might was ENnie nominated, and it was doing very well on Drive-Thru-RPG. I believe Brandon was just asking about that, and it soared up to number 2 at one point, and it's now still number 18, right, on Drive-Thru?
Yeah. Oh, our previous Kickstarter before this was Ultimate Spheres of Power for Pathfinder, where we took... After we did the Spheres of Power original system, we started a Patreon to try and fund a handbook a month / every 2 months sometimes to kind of expand that system. And after a couple of years of that, we did Ultimate Spheres of Power, which took, I think it's over 600 pages. I don't think I have a copy with me to check the exact number.
614 is what Drive-Thru puts it in at. So
okay, I recall you recently mentioning on Facebook that the soft cover could probably stop a bullet or kill one of your player characters. So you're looking forward to seeing what the hardcover is going to look like.
Yeah, there's been some weird hiccups with the hardcover that's not available yet, but the soft cover is in, and yeah, it was like that thick or something ludicrous. And it's a huge book. We made it as big as we could while still fitting on a shelf dimension-wise. But yeah, it took over 22, I think it might have been 24 different handbooks and mixed them with the main book to create our complete Spheres, 600 pages of content stuff.
Yeah, just going through on the list on Drive-Thru, I count 35 different products that went into that. Now that's the main books and such like that to make up that 614. And just the main books, you don't need anything beyond those. Everything else was gravy, but they come together really, really well.
Which I should say, for anyone who may never have seen this before and is a little bit intimidated, you don't have to read all 600 pages. Like one of the things we really strive for Spheres is as long as you know what kind of magic you want to do. Like I'm a death magic necromancer, great. Just go to the death sphere. You can read that and you can run without having to master all the other pages.
Which is something in like Pathfinder or D&D, where you're like, okay, even just with the base book, and you're like, this is the kind of magic that I want to do. Now I have to skim through all the spell names and kind of figure out which ones might apply to the type of magic I want. And sometimes the names and the little descriptions don't really tell you what they are. In here, like you're saying, just go to the section and it's going to get you covered.
Yeah.
Would you mind me showing off to the audience my copy of Ultimate Spheres of Power?
Sure.
Okay, let me go and do that then, so that people can kind of get an idea. While I'm loading that up, though, do you want to tell people, give people an idea of what it means? You know, if they want to play, let's say, a destruction sphere, since that's on our page right now, what kind of powers they would expect, or and how that structure elevates as they level.
Okay, sure. So the whole shtick of spheres, again, for people who may not be familiar with it, is to, like I said, it's building your character by concept. And what that means is each sphere contains a certain ability or set of abilities that are very thematic and gives you something that you can do at will, and then gives you a system for ways to augment and increase that at-will ability. And then you build it by expanding out in the sphere. So the example that we have up there is if you are a classic, I think the example I used in the video for the Kickstarter, a classic pyromancer, you want to be throwing fire, that's your shtick. So you would take the nature sphere with the fire package, and that gives you some default fire abilities. And then you would take the destruction sphere. And the destruction sphere, its shtick is it gives you your at-will blast. It's your basic, you know, I'm a sorcerer, I want to blow things up, blast, your destructive blast. And it gives you the ability to do that at will, the ability to augment it limited a number of times per day to make it a big blast. And by dipping into the nature fire sphere, you then get the ability to do a fire blast. And then as you would gain levels, you would then spend talents to increase the number of things you can do with that. So the classic example is in your default D&D Pathfinder Pyromancer, unless you are building custom spells, which is a whole nother thing of trying to balance and talk to your GM about, you are doing Burning Hands at first level, and that's your Pyromancer ability. And then you learn how to do a Flaming Sphere when you get to third level, and then you get to throw your first Fireball at fifth level. And your progression as a Pyromancer is very, very predetermined and only goes as far as what can happen. But
and one thing, Burning Hands after a few levels you never use again. And there's no spell that looks and feels that same way. Here you got it gets better on that kind of effect, whatever your chosen one is.
Yeah. So what we do instead is, if you are in the destruction sphere, as you gain levels, you gain talents that you can spend to buy options within that sphere. So at first level, if you want to be throwing fireballs, you can build into a fireball throwing character. And that would be what you could do from first level. You're already have that concept and are running it. And then as you gain levels, you get to pick what kind of augmentation you want to do. Like, for example, if you imagine your character as a magical sniper, like literally throwing fireballs at someone 1,000 feet away, you can build that, and then you can do that. Or if instead you see your character being a very close range, like fire around your fists, punching people out kind of character, you can build that. You don't have to wait until the particular spell unlocks. As long as you know in your head what you want your character to do, it's very easy to find an expression for that. And the same thing builds well for creating a wall of fire. If you want to be doing Burning Hands, but have it grow exponentially and always be a grand option till at the highest level you're burning a forest down with your wave of flame, you can do that. And that was kind of the whole shtick of it, is no matter what you imagine in your head, as long as you can figure out what you want to be, then building your character becomes very easy. You can pull in an X-Men character, you can pull in whatever, Mistborn from that book series, whatever you can think of, you should be able to build it. And of course, I mean, with 600 pages of content, yes, there's a bunch of archetypes, yes, there's a bunch of classes, yes, there's a bunch of feats, a bunch of options. The levels of complexity can go as far down as you want them to. But what we really wanted to strive for, and what I'd really, I mean, you can say if we made it better than we did, but that running the spheres, opening the spheres is as simple as I know in my head what abilities my character should do, and then I can do them.
Awesome.
And that's just the magic aspect. Then there's Spheres of Might, which kind of, like Adam was saying, takes that same kind of attitude. And so if you have an idea that one of my favorite classes out of 3rd edition was the Marshal from the Miniatures Handbook. It was not a great class. There were problems with it, but it had a very cool, let's do this in a different way feel. And in there, I forget the class name, Commander or something like that, but you can lead your group and make people better because of that, because of the talents and the spheres that you're picking from. And another one's the Alchemist, where you take and make better alchemical items. And they're really fun. You read the book and you want to play those characters, is my feel.
That's my feeling as well, but you know that from a long time ago. Well, Jacob, what is your favorite aspect about spheres? You've been really quiet.
I also like that, considering a lot of things we do here on the BAMF podcast is superhero related. The fact that you can integrate superhero ideas into your fantasy game using the spheres, such as if you wanted to make a Thor type character, you would grab like a strength sphere. So you're all about doing really super strong things. And then you could grab like the nature sphere for weather controlling, and you've pretty much got a Thor type right there.
Or lightning, or just straight lightning.
Exactly. So you can incorporate the characters from pretty much whatever genre. I've seen spheres that'll let you be the Jedi. I've seen spheres that'll let you, like Adam said, do airbenders, and it's wonderfully diverse, and you can bring in characters from any genre into your Pathfinder game, and now thankfully your 5th edition game, and just play what you want.
And it isn't just that diversity, it's that modularity, right? Because you can play whatever class you still want, and you don't have to worry about, well, is this going to totally throw off the balance of my table if I let somebody play a Spheres of Power, this alternate system? Because a lot of times, like Brandon was saying before we started, we tried a lot of different systems of add in, and it was always like, this is like pulling teeth, this is difficult. But for this one, it was very seamless, and we could just transport back and forth. And it's so modular that there are aspects you can take from it, and there are aspects you can leave behind and do whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So for, as Alice is showing us, we have this long list, and these are just Spheres of Power classes that are in that long list.
And
what
636 pages.
What classes are we looking at for the 5th edition version?
Okay, that's actually one of those things that is, sorry.
What are we looking at before we hit our wonderful stretch goals that I've been looking forward to since I saw them?
Because of the 5e paradigm, subclasses are pushed a lot more necessarily than classes. So all of the classes from Pathfinder spheres, or at least most of them, are going to be in the book. The question is just if they're going to be their own class, or if they're a subclass of another class, or something like that. So it's all going to be there, but it is going to be in different shapes depending upon what we think would work best for it. Like the Mage Knight is making the transition as a class, but I believe the Armorist is going to be a Mage Knight subclass. So it's still a little bit up in the air what the final shape of all that will be as we decide what belongs where. But we are going to have, see what we have here. What was the things? So I need to find the list myself just to make sure that I'm remembering it all correctly.
Well,
there's a lot.
Well, you look for that one. I just have a story that is spheres related. And so back when 4th edition came out, my group was not a big fan of it. Whether you like it or you hate it, that's not here nor there. But one guy, and he was probably the most vocally against it. He found one character that he actually really liked, and it was the Eladrin. Those are the teleporting elves, as I remember. And then he went with the Mage Knight, or whatever they called it in there, and went on the Defender tree, where he was teleporting around the battlefield all the time. And what he really liked about it is it was 4th edition finally did something for him, because it was something that he could not have done in 3rd edition. It was a new class, and it used that system that they were presenting. And then here, he's not with our group anymore. We have many, many miles between us, and his life's way too busy. But here is something that he could do that exact same character in a Pathfinder type setting, which he liked a whole lot more than 4th edition. Where if he went with, taking one of the more fighting-oriented classes and going with Warp as his primary power, he'd be able to do that teleporting around the battlefield, messing with people, and just you never know where this is going to come from. And I think that he would love that, and that's something that from the first time that I read Spheres of Power always popped into my mind, was about Al.
Did you find your list?
Oh, yes. Sorry.
No problem.
Listening to the story.
Oh, that's awesome.
At the moment, we have sorted to bring 4 new classes for Spheres of Power and 4 new classes for Spheres of Might to 5th edition. So for Spheres of Power, it is the Incanter, the Mage Knight, the Prodigy, and the Shifter. And the shtick of that then was the Incanter is the whole shtick of Spheres is you can use it with the core classes. You don't have to go to our classes to use the spheres. But as far as our classes being very much designed to integrate with the spheres to help you out, the Incanter is just a pure magic sphere user. His whole shtick is a blank slate for you to stick those spheres on and build whatever kind of magic user you have in mind. The Mage Knight is kind of the same thing, but built to be a Gish character, the frontline fighter, paladin, ranger style. I've got magic and I've got a sword. And then the Prodigy for sitting halfway in the middle, who kind of does a bit of everything. But then we were throwing in the Shifter, which is a very specialized class. I think I had an update about this in the Kickstarter. In classic D20 fantasy, your class determines your flavor. If you're a wizard, you're a wizard. You do wizard things. If you are a ranger, you're a ranger. You do ranger things. And so the class is kind of your one-stop shop for that. Because we're decoupling those abilities and your casting tradition from class, class doesn't actually have to imply flavor the way that it does in your classic game. So that's why we have these classes kind of the way they are. The Incanter, the Mage Knight, and the Prodigy are blank slates. They're just kind of new ways to approach the spheres and build what you have in mind. The Shifter, though, is completely different. It's if you want a character that is a hardcore shapeshifter, their powers are in shapeshifting, it allows you to fully realize that specialized concept without necessarily having to go like the other ways. Like if you don't want to be a druid, you just want to be a werewolf. And you don't want to be casting werewolfisms on other people. You just want to go in focused. It's a focused class that allows you to make the most out of that sphere and that set of powers, still in a bit of a neutral way. But that's the different approach we have to classes with spheres, is they're either a lot more blanky so that you can add the flavor to it as you build it, or they're ways to use the spheres in a specialized way that doing more and greater things.
I don't make a... so totally
I'm playing with cards.
Okay. And then for Spheres of Might, then, the 4 classes that are default in the book are the Conscript, the Armiger, the Scholar, and the Craftsman.
The Scholar's my favorite out of that, out of all of the Spheres of Might characters, just because it was so unique.
Yeah. And so the Conscript is kind of a martial incanter. It's a build your own martial character through the spheres specialist. The Armiger is a fun one. It's a character that actually swaps its spheres around depending upon what equipment it has equipped. Like the whole shtick of it is a lot of the time, and this is not necessarily a fault of the game, but it's something that happens. In your D20 fantasy games from D&D 5th edition all the way down, you pick one thing and specialize it. you're a sword user, you're an axe user. You don't really get a lot of variety of being, well, having variety. So the Armiger is a class that is very specifically built on doing that you can actually equip spheres into your equipment. So if you want to dual wield and then drop your dagger to pull out your pistol and shoot someone and then throw it at them and then grab something else and have a lot of fun with that switching around, it's designed to really play into that play style. And then the Scholar is the embodiment of martial utility, the things that would normally be magic. It's kind of a way of showing off what you can do with the Spheres of Might system that is not necessarily punching someone in the face, that in the old system is just regulated to, well, we'll have a spell to do that, hopefully. Or if not, we'll stare blankly at the wall and punch it. And then the Craftsman is fun because it just kind of mixes in the idea of, I've always loved Craftsman characters. When we started doing Spheres of Might, I needed, in the Pathfinder version, he was called the Technician. He was a mad scientist. The way that I envisioned him was he was if Mythbusters became a D&D class. And so in D&D 5e, we're calling him the Craftsman now because he's encompassing a few different subclasses. So you've got your mad scientist technician, but you also can have a chef expert who, much like a bard with music, turns food into an entire class power. And then I think we also had one for the sapper doing trap specialization, and then the blacksmith, which was another Spheres of Might class from Pathfinder that's now a subclass of the Craftsman, kind of doing that same thing, taking the idea of not just having your equipment, but making the most of your equipment, giving bonuses to your allies' equipment, taking that bardic approach of taking it from a something that you do to, no, this is now my class power, that with me on your side, your armor is better, your weapons are better than they could be if I was not here.
Your arrow strikes true into that one spot in the dragon.
Yeah, and I know crafting works differently in D&D 5e as opposed to Pathfinder. The blacksmith, we had all sorts of powers on how to build magic items in Pathfinder. That doesn't translate as exactly over D&D 5e, but at the same time, that does mean that there's a lot of extra room to play. That kind of equipment expert hasn't been seen in D&D 5e, except for maybe the why am I forgetting his name now? The Eberron inventor, artificer. But kind of taking that approach, but taking it not necessarily requiring your artificer approach to it, of just being an equipment expert who can do fun things like that.
Rolling back a couple minutes really quick, we have a viewer who mentions that the 5th edition sounds like it would also allow them to simulate powers for modern day games and incorporate it into ultra modern 5th edition. And so just superpowers and all that, and the modularity of being in different genres. It sounds like we already have got you someone who's going to try it in ultra modern. That's awesome.
Awesome. Now, ultra modern, is that like the D&D 5e then for either modern D20 or Unions of Masterminds?
I know very little about it. It's a 5th edition setting of its own. It was on Kickstarter a while back. It's a project by Chris Diaz, and but I know very little about it personally, so I'm going to refrain from talking about it.
Okay. I feel bad making any sort of a claim if I'm not 100% sure because I haven't seen the thing, but I am guessing, yes, we did build it specifically for that purpose. If you want to be,
just on their Kickstarter page, included pre-modern and contemporary settings as well as those in the far-flung fantastic future. So.
Okay.
Whatever that's worth.
The bit that I knew about it was like you could have Western characters, Wild West characters, and then there were like the World War mass characters, and then there were like not quite space, but a little bit distant future post-apoc. And so from what I understood, in the little bit that I do know, you could play basically anything in the modern era through it was the design. But I haven't personally gotten a chance to play it yet.
Okay.
And it is an adaptation for 5th edition. So
I see one other piece of art is very Shadowrun, and so I'm now very interested in learning a little bit more about this.
Yeah, but I think it should work entirely. We wanted to make sure that, like Jacob mentioned, if you want to be a superhero, if you want to be any of those things that other genres that are fun to play in, we wanted to make sure you could do that with spheres. Yeah, so
Totally
That's
get
awesome.
that.
And you've already hit one stretch goal for the Elementalist and the Striker classes getting added. And we are within striking distance of the next stretch goal,
Yes,
where
I have to
Soul
update
Weaver
the-
and Commander.
I have to update the Kickstarter once we're done here and add on the information on the next stretch goal past that.
Oh, that was going to be my next question to you.
But yeah, the Commander is fun and is a class I'm really happy to see go to 5e, because it was all about, I apologize for how much I'm shilling, but that's what I'm going to do.
This is why you're here.
Yes,
Yes,
we want
exactly.
you to shill, even though we're already in for a penny, in for a pound. Please tell us what we're going to be getting.
But one of the things when we approached Spheres of Might, Spheres of Power, its creation was a whole nother story of ragtag figuring out how to do this. But Spheres of Might, we were a few years into Spheres of Power and wanted to kind of approach it very specifically. And one of the things we really wanted to do with it, one of those problems that you hear people talk about every now and then, from D&D 5e all the way back, I don't know how many decades we've been debating the Gimli Problem. But I always heard it as the Gimli Problem. That
I've
if
never
you're,
heard
you're
that
level,
term before.
level 1 wizard is Gandalf, but he's, throwing fireworks around. And a level 1 fighter is Gimli with his big axe. Level 20 Gandalf is rewriting the rules of reality to shape his whim. Level 20 fighter is Gimli, but now his axe is shinier. But that's it. That was one of those problems that I'd heard back for years, people that would complain about, like, that they loved the fighter, but they hated the fact that attack again was kind of all they had. So for Spheres of Might, when we tried to expand what martials could do, that was very specifically what we wanted to tackle, was this idea of going back to the literary sources, which D&D pulled from, and that we still pull from when we're trying to tell our stories. What is a martial character supposed to do? And I mean, you've got the knight in shining armor who's riding a horse, inspiring his men with his banner, leading, all sorts of tactical charges. And you've got not just, your basic I'm a rogue who's doing thievy stuff, but there was all sorts of things that you should be able to do as a martial character that was regulated to magic. That you could be a bard and you have a magical class power of I inspire the people around me, but you couldn't do that as a knight. You couldn't be a commander. So the commander class was very specifically supposed to pull on that idea of being a martial controller, that I can increase the power of my allies, not just in a flat bonus, but really enact crazy tactical things that only my commanding genius can make them pull off. And that's so it had it had special tactical powers that could add extra actions onto your allies as you get things into formation to pull off something awesome. And it also was really fun because it tried to solve that problem of what magic could do by having a lot of external out of combat powers as well to kind of tap into that. That I know, at least as a GM, there's a lot of things you can wing, but eventually you get tired of winging it. Like my allies need to teleport to that end of the world. They don't have a wizard with teleport in the party, so we have to make a new adventure to sidetrack to go find whatever. So it actually codified some powers of, no, I have that influence. I can find what we need. I can call in an expert to make things happen. And at least from my perspective, I mean, as a GM, sometimes that is a wonderful thing to run. Sometimes it's also fun to just have a player who can have that ability and you don't have to worry about it. So bringing it over to 5e is trying to bring that with it as well. A lot of tactical powers, a lot of the ability to not just inspire your allies with bonus, but do the sorts of controlling the battlefield that regularly only a wizard might be able to do with his specialized spells, but you can do it because as a commander and a leader of men, you should be able to do that and not have to have the GM flub the fact that your mercenary who can't spell his name and your grand knight in shining armor with a pedigree back generations of grand military prowess are technically the same character now, like, or they were. Now they can really play differently, and each one can play to its strengths and feel different at your table.
That's
anyway,
fantastic.
so I'm happy to see it.
And one thing on the story, and I don't remember which one it was. It might have been in the Spheres of Might book that I read at one point, was that you came out with Spheres of Power, and Jacob was telling us just the other day on you kind of had this like, oh my god, I think I've got a game company now. But the idea of Spheres of Power was that wizards, there's the people who play the 15-minute adventuring day, and there's the people who, hold all their spells back until the right moment. And you wanted to kind of bridge those two, give the wizards something useful to do other than I strike to aid or I ineffectually shoot my crossbow, but still being able to bring a lot of bang to it. And then people said, well, what are you going to do for the martial classes? And you said, well, we were trying to make the wizards more like the martial classes. And so what do you mean? What are we going to do for the fighters? And do you remember that story? I think that's in one of your books that I read.
I don't know.
Okay.
But hey, Spheres of Might takes care of all that.
Right?
Yes, it's been a little bit of a blur and a crazy journey for you, huh?
Yeah. Yes. But yeah, in answer kind of to that concern, what we found, and obviously this is a few years ago, new products have come out. I know the approach to cantrips in Pathfinder 2nd edition and D&D 5e has changed and stuff like that. But when we came out, that paradigm was very hard, that your cantrips were useless, your spells were a thing, and your marshals didn't have powers. And a lot of the answers people had to, say, making your marshals more fun was actually making them feel like proto-wizards, where they got like either some daily or encounter limited powers, which were pretty much spells, and making them run that way. What we really tried to do was we tried to first, make the casters feel more concept based, and at the same time, therefore, extend their life so they weren't as shackled to a daily resource. And then for Spheres of Might, we wanted to keep marshals feeling like marshals. They don't feel like proto wizards. They just feel like their tactical belt has increased. We do have an on and off resource in Spheres of Might, just martial focus, doing your giant move that afterwards you probably should take a breather. And we've got some abilities to manipulate your focus. You can build different ways of getting it back quickly, so you can have your signature move you just do over and over again, but you're not limited to a signature move, a one-trick pony, really expanding out what you could do. Like, for an example, one of the things we did in Pathfinder with it specifically was invented the battered condition, so that instead of having to spend all of your feats to be a disarmer, I can disarm you now and you don't get to stab me first. We introduced the battered condition, which took away someone's ability, they're being hammered down, and so they don't have the ability to get at you for your attack of opportunity. So suddenly doing combat maneuvers became, instead of a one-trick pony build running up there and doing my trick, you could instead have a teammate tactical thing where one guy smashes him and batters the guy back, and then the other one uses that as an opening to get in a trip, and then so your team could work together and you could do a lot of tactics pulling up what the situation required rather than your one big trick.
Brandon.
That's something that I love, because you can ask Alice or people who've played D&D with me for years, is I love a teamwork build. Somebody who makes the team, the oil, basically. I make the team run smoother. I make the team run better type character. And so I'm often the cleric or something like that, because there's very often nothing that's going to help that more than somebody that's got cure and buff spells. But there are a few things, and this is something specific to me that, I love because of that aspect. And what were you going to say, sweetheart?
I was just going to say, isn't this one of your favorite aspects?
See?
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about a support build character. I know a lot of people like to be the ones who are all about, I'm about dealing damage, I want to hit hard, but there is a ton of benefit to having support classes and support characters in your team. They only make everyone better.
Absolutely.
It's
For
actually
me-
one of the. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say that, for me, Technician's one of my favorites on it, on the Spheres of Might ones, because I like to be the person that's outside the box and doing crazy stuff, and you can ask these too. So that allows me to do so. Brandon has drawn schematics of one of my Tinker Gnomes drawn when I was drawing and playing, and here's my new invention, everyone, repeatedly. So
that's fun. That's actually one of the things that came up a lot when we were doing the Ultimate Spheres of Power Kickstarter and playtest. Was kind of that idea. I know there's a lot of theories for how to differentiate your classes and your actions and your whether your MMO job. But one of the things that came up a lot during the playtest was that idea of the what was it? The hammer, the anvil, and the arm as a way of dividing up builds. That the anvil is your classic tank. I stop them from going. Your hammer is your classic damage dealer who's supposed to smash the guy against the anvil. And then the arm character being that support build, the person whose job is to make the other two work better. So that was actually something that came up a lot in conversation about how to be an arm. What arm meant in Spheres when you could do things like that, and you could build your whole character around not just healing, but being like, I'm 100 feet in the back, healing my guys in mass, bringing them back from the dead. You can't stop them because my whole character is now built around being the world's greatest, most versatile healer, as opposed to certain other builds like that. So that is something that comes up, I think, in Spheres. I don't know if in Spheres more than other people, but like you said, like if you wanted to do that job in classic Vancian, you have to be a cleric, because that's kind of no other way to do it. And in ours, you can do all sorts of stuff. I don't think I've seen a sniper healer build necessarily, but it is entirely possible, or any number of other such things.
And our viewer wants you all to know that they share your preferences, Brandon, on playing support classes. Rita Snow also loves playing support classes.
Excellent.
It is fun to be Hannibal from A-Team, and at the end of a fight, put your cigar in your mouth and just be, I love it when a plan comes together. Now, Alice comes up with the plans. I just kind of make them work better because of mechanics. She's smart. I just like things getting smashed by people.
This is how reputations get built. You say stuff about me, and then I'm like, where did that happen?
If you say enough stuff, then you guys can open like some giant Twitter play with Alice's plans.
He's been threatening me with my gnome says Twitter account for a long time, for years now.
I'd have to write everything down or remember everything down that you say, and then.
This is why I write them down after they happen with like game night quotes or apartment quotes.
Yeah, just don't do that with me.
If I can plug someone else.
Yeah.
What is the guy's name? I'm just trying. You're just reminding me so much. I'm terrible with names. I am the worst person with names I've ever met. I think I forgot the name of someone I was on a date with once. So forgive me if I don't remember. Boomer. Is it Clint? Clive?
Clint Boomer.
Clint Boomer. He's been having an entire giant Twitter run for months now of a fake D&D party. So if you want to do stuff the gnome says as a Twitter handle, I think that's gold, and you could totally run with it.
Clinton Boomer is trying to get me to run a campaign to have people finance me to draw comics of his party's stuff.
I'd do it.
I would totally do it if people will pay me, but I don't have. I'm so busy with other projects that unless I'm getting payment for it, I can't. I have to focus on the things that will pay my bills.
Put food on your table, put a roof over your head.
Yeah, all the important stuff.
And then maybe eventually some toys on your shelf.
That would be nice.
I mean, obviously, I'm not involved in this because Boomer is the writer and you'd be the artist. but I'd back a Patreon that builds that. So just throwing that out there. Just have him make a Patreon for creating the, I don't know what he'd want to call it, the dysfunctional party comics, and go on from there.
So, Adam, when you are not designing this 600-page wonderful, manuscript for Pathfinder, and then taking parts of that over for D&D 5th edition, what do you do for fun and all?
Okay, that's actually a weird question to have, because I actually am
Don't
about
remember that time.
No, it's okay. So my background is as an actor, actually. I was one of those schmucks in acting school determined to go to New York and chase Broadway shows. Unlike most of those schmucks, I was married with a kid and a half by the time I graduated college. And you can't do that. You can't be chasing shows in New York with that much of a living expense. And that's kind of part of the process that made me discover game design, was suddenly like, well, that plan doesn't work out. So my wife's going to go back and get her master's, and I'm going to be taking care of the kids, and we're going to try and find whatever's. So then, when we discovered this, and now I'm a full-time professional game designer, and that is fun and wonderful, and I love it. But it has nothing to do with anything I trained for to get me to this point. My other things, like, I did ballroom dance. I was going to be a ballroom dance teacher, and forgive the name drop, but I took novel writing classes from Brandon Sanderson.
Oh, sweet.
Is cool. And one of the people that was in my writing group is now Charlie Holmberg, who's like a big fantasy author herself. So for me, like, now that I've had a few years to get the design work done, or, working, and I finally find a little bit of extra time, what I miss most and what I want to do most is actually get back into writing and creating. And which is why I find myself in this weird position, because a couple months ago, I was hit in the head with an idea for a story that, looking at it, I'm like, wow, this totally needs to be made, and it needs to be a webcomic. It's designed to be a webcomic. I don't draw at all.
Come on, Rich Berlew also does not draw, and look at Giant in the Playground.
Kind of, exactly.
Rich Berlew has made a huge career off stick figures.
I know him, XKCD, and in like the manga world, there's the guy One who invented One Punch Man, and if you look at the original web drawings, it's like he has to label what things are because his drawings are so bad you can't tell. So I know there's precedent. And maybe a few months from now, I'll be out there doing something like that. But that's what I'm doing with my time right now, is trying to learn how to draw, because the muses hit me over the head with something. And I know that sounds like so esoteric, if you're like, oh, the idea wasn't mine, the muse came to me. But no, I got hit on the head by an idea a few months ago, and I have to make it.
Yeah.
So.
All right. For anyone who wants to learn to draw, the resource I always recommend, a resource that taught me how to draw comics the Marvel way. It teaches you everything you know about the basics of art, perspective, shading, all the basics. You'll get everything you need out of that.
On your recommendation, I actually did buy that book. So I'm trying. I'm so trying. Is there a way for me to share images? I can show you guys the terrible things that I've been trying to come up with. They're terrible. I guess that's
well, I believe you can share screen.
My early art was not good, not good at all. But
like, I think it's
you keep at it and you get better, like anything.
I mean, maybe this is a weird thing, but like, the other thing I do is, my wife is a comparative literature, and then she got a I can't remember the name of her degrees. She has one of those degrees that encompasses everything. It's like comparative studies, aka the history of humans from the beginning of time. But the other thing I do is wax philosophical. That's my other pastime, because that's her idea of a fun Friday night. In today's culture, in what it is like to be an independent creator, it's a very weird world, I feel like. And you guys doing this YouTube channel and stuff, and Jacob with his Patreon are completely in here. That it's no longer necessarily an individual business. It is a what do you, who are you? What do you do? That you can be an artist, but you also are running a podcast and doing a Patreon and doing this and that. As a designer, I kind of do. I mean, I'm a publisher, so I have a lot more of a one niche about what I do, because I have to hire other people to do these other things to make the books. But still, that question always pops up a little bit about, well, when is the time when I should start doing some YouTube videos or something to get some outreach going, or that all-encompassing range of things. And the weird thing when you do a business like this, I find, is that you start thinking about everything you ever have done or will do as a possible revenue stream. Like, I've seen people, I think it was Jason Nilsson, the head of Legendary Games, talking about how much he loves to cook, and he's made a rule that he will never, ever, ever monetize cooking in any way. He'll never turn a camera on and try out a cooking channel or something, because he wants to keep that as his special thing that's not tied into that world of how can I use this to reach more people? What can I do? And for me, I feel like that's in this weird place, because I do want to start drawing and I do want to make a comic, that the only way to really justify that is trying to find a way to monetize it, because it's not something I can just throw out there a little bit. It's something I really am trying to learn how to do. And so that world of when and where and how you're allowed to suddenly become an amateur, and then I've got this side business publishing wonderful books, and therefore should I make a pseudonym so I can be out there doing stick figures going, hey, look at me.
So bring it back.
Because the first question that popped into mind when I started this was, okay, who can I hire? But I also don't feel like I could use, company funds to fund something like that when I have no name in that sphere. But anyway, to whoever might be watching this, one day, Adam Meyers will be an amazing artist, and you will read my comic, and you will be amazed at what I can do.
Well, we'll be keeping an eye on you. To bring it back to monetization and publishing and your Spheres projects, should people expect a Pathfinder 2 conversion coming up, or any other systems coming up?
I mean, we will most definitely do a Pathfinder 2. The biggest question for us has just been, when we did Pathfinder 1, we tried as hard as we could not to rewrite rules, only expand them if they weren't clear. And like the nature sphere in Pathfinder is really just the environmental rules of Pathfinder codified into a weapon. And we're trying to do the same approach for D&D 5e. We're trying not to just transpose Pathfinder rules to D&D 5e. We're trying to work with the rules as they exist there, and if they're a little too loosey, give some structure to them, but keep it to the system. So for Pathfinder 2e, we don't feel like, I don't think we could convert to spheres until the Game Mastery Guide is out, and maybe the Advanced Player's Guide, so that we knew what classes there were and what rules, not just like the bare bones, but the more advanced kind of GME, environment-y, whatever rules are for PF2. So we could then translate spheres for that. I personally would hate to translate spheres too early and then have Paizo come out with a book that invalidates half of spheres, because I don't want someone to have to choose between playing Pathfinder or playing our version of Pathfinder 2e. So that's what we're kind of waiting on. I'd love to do it. Obviously, we need to finish the D&D 5e conversion first and fulfill that Kickstarter. But once Paizo has another book or two out and we know what their system will look like, that is definitely on the list of things to do.
Awesome. Well, I think you already have a couple pledges at this table, so.
Yay.
To go back to a couple minutes ago when you were saying you have nothing to train that trained you for this, well, yes, you do. If you trained to be an actor, you trained to evoke emotions from people, and you have a strong outpouring of positive emotion for this beautiful.
You paused.
It looks like we lost Brandon.
I'm sorry. Thank you for the compliment. The compliment killed your camera.
I think we might have also lost Lala.
Oh, well, everyone, assuming this is still going live and you can see the two of us, I don't.
Well,
how's your Patreon been going, Jacob? I know I had a lot a while ago because of my scheduling fell apart, but
Oh, no problem. My Patreon's still going pretty well. I'm still in around the $500 mark, which is pretty nice for an artist to get every month. So it's been a really nice following, and otherwise, I'm really excited about seeing what you're working on. I've been enjoying the history projects that I've been doing with your wife, and that because those characters have been a blast.
I know. I think. I mean, we're going to have another list of those for you because she's working on the. I think we're on the 4th book now. It's a 6-book series she's working on, and we've got a few more things like that. I was curious. Do you have you ever done anything? I don't know if they can hear us still on the YouTube
probably
channel.
not, but
Right,
but we should probably wrap up soon so we can get the show ended.
okay, but just I guess a quick question for you before I go then. Have you ever done anything with animation? Because I think I have ideas for maybe not like full-blown animation, but like ads or stuff, thinking of giving her new ways to use those characters, and I thought I'd ask before we see if
I have not done anything with animation myself. I would love to learn how to do animation. It would be something I would need to learn how to do though. I've never done it.
Okay, well, okay. We're just looking into it. It's another one of those things where like there's I think After Effects can do that. Do we have the time to learn how to use that? But those books have been doing really well, and those characters have been doing well, and I want to give her more to do with them. We need to figure out what to do and how to make it happen.
Excellent.
Okay. Well,
assuming the show is still running, this has been the Banff Podcast, and we hope you've been enjoying our discussion with Adam Meyers, talking about the Kickstarter for Spheres of Might and Spheres of Power for 5th edition D&D. Any last words you have there, Adam?
Not really, but thank you to everyone who's watching, who's seen this, and thank you for going over and checking out the Kickstarter if you do that, because I am really excited to bring it over and just see a new table, a new system, a new group of people and what can be done. So thank you.
Excellent. Well, hopefully we can have you on again. And I know that Alice and Brandon are both anxious to get you on our sister podcast, Babies with Knives, where we will do a live play of the game once it becomes available.
All right. Awesome. Thank you.
And otherwise, we will see you next time on the Band Podcast.
All right.